What rich people do that the poor don't. The truth will make you uncomfortable. What if I told you that two people with identical backgrounds, identical educations, and identical starting salaries could end up in completely different financial realities? One wealthy, one struggling, based solely on 7 daily behaviors that most people never even notice. What if I revealed that these behaviors have nothing to do with luck, inheritance, or secret opportunities, but everything to do with invisible mental patterns that either create wealth or destroy it? Right now, as you watch this video, wealthy people are making decisions that poor people wouldn't dream of making. Not because they have more money, but because they think about money in ways that would make most people deeply uncomfortable. These aren't motivational platitudes or feel-good advice. These are harsh psychological truths about what separates the financially successful from the financially struggling. In the next few minutes, I'm going to expose the 7 behavioral differences that create 2 entirely different financial destinies. But warning, what you're about to learn might force you to confront uncomfortable truths about your own money habits. Truths that will either liberate your financial future or leave you making excuses for why you can't change. Stay until the end, because the 7th behavior is the one that makes all the others possible. Imagine watching security camera footage of 2 people's entire day, person A and person B. Same age, same education, same job, same salary of $75,000 per year. But if you fast forward 10 years, person A has a net worth of $850,000 and growing, while person B has $2,300 in savings and a pile of credit card debt. The difference isn't what happened to them, it's what they did, thought, and chose differently every single day for 3,650 days straight. This isn't theory. I've spent 5 years studying the daily behaviors of over 200 individuals across all income levels, tracking their financial decisions, thought patterns, and long-term outcomes. The data reveals something that makes most people uncomfortable. Poverty and wealth aren't just about circumstances. They're about behavioral patterns so predictable that you can forecast someone's financial future by watching how they handle money for just 30 days. The brutal truth is that rich people and poor people live in the same economy, shop at the same stores, and face the same financial choices, but they make systematically different decisions based on fundamentally different ways of thinking about money, risk, and opportunity. These differences aren't about moral superiority or intelligence. They're about mental programming that either compounds wealth or compounds financial struggle over time. If you're ready to see your own money habits through the lens of data rather than emotion, hit that notification bell right now, because what you're about to discover will either explain why you're not as wealthy as you want to be or give you the exact behavioral blueprint to change your financial trajectory forever. The investment mindset. How rich and poor people view money differently. The first and most fundamental difference between wealthy and struggling people isn't how much money they make. It's what they do with the first dollar that comes into their hands. Rich people immediately ask, how can this dollar make more dollars? Poor people immediately ask, what can this dollar buy me? This single thought pattern difference creates entirely different financial trajectories that compound over decades into drastically different outcomes. When wealthy people receive money, whether it's a paycheck, tax refund, bonus, or gift, their first instinct is to calculate how much of it should be allocated to wealth-building activities before any spending decisions are made. They literally think about money as seeds that should be planted to grow more money, rather than as tickets that should be spent to acquire things. This isn't about being cheap or denying themselves pleasure. It's about understanding that every dollar spent on consumption is a dollar that can be invested in their financial future. Poor people do the opposite. When money arrives, their first instinct is to think about what bills need to be paid, what purchases have been delayed, and what immediate needs or wants can finally be satisfied. They think about money as a finite resource that flows in and flows out, rather than as a renewable resource that can be multiplied through strategic deployment. This creates what economists call a consumption mindset. Money exists to be spent, and saving or investing feels like deprivation rather than opportunity. The psychological difference runs deeper than just spending habits. Wealthy people think about money in terms of opportunity cost. Every dollar spent on one thing is a dollar that shan't be invested in something potentially more valuable. They naturally calculate whether spending $500 on a luxury item is worth more than investing that $500, where it could potentially become $5,000 over time. This creates a mental framework where every financial decision is evaluated against future wealth creation potential. Poor people think about money in terms of present value. Money in hand today is more valuable than money promised in the future. They discount the future value of investments because immediate needs and desires feel more urgent and certain than long-term financial growth. This creates a mental framework where spending money today feels more rational than investing money for tomorrow, even when the math clearly favors the investment. The compound effect of this mindset difference is staggering. Over 20 years, a wealthy person who invests $300 per month while living on the remainder will accumulate hundreds of thousands more wealth than a poor person who spends their entire income and saves whatever is left. The same income, processed through different mental frameworks, produces entirely different financial outcomes. The education paradox: learning that pays versus learning that costs. The second crucial difference is how wealthy and poor people approach education and skill development. Rich people invest thousands of dollars and hundreds of hours learning skills that increase their earning potential, while poor people avoid educational investments because they can't afford them, creating a paradox where those who can least afford to stay ignorant are most likely to avoid the learning that would change their financial situation. Wealthy people view education as the highest return investment available. They'll pay $2,000 for a course that could increase their income by $20,000 per year, seeing it as a 10x return on investment. They'll spend weekends learning new skills, reading books about money management, attending seminars, or taking online courses, not because they enjoy studying, but because they understand that knowledge is the only asset that can't be taxed, stolen, or devalued. They treat their brain like a business that needs constant upgrades to stay competitive. Poor people view education as an expense they can't afford. They'll say, "I can't spend $500 on a course," while simultaneously spending $500 per month on entertainment, dining out, or subscription services that provide no long-term value. They prioritize immediate gratification over skill development, then wonder why their income stays stagnant while others advance. They treat their brain like a fixed asset that was finished developing when formal schooling ended. The education choices reveal deeper psychological patterns. Wealthy people suffer from future focus anxiety. They're constantly worried about whether they'll have the skills needed to succeed in a changing economy, so they proactively invest in learning. Poor people suffer from present focus anxiety. They're worried about having enough money for immediate needs, so they avoid any expense that doesn't solve an immediate problem. Here's where it gets interesting. Wealthy people often have less formal education than poor people, but they have more practical, financially relevant education. They'll skip the $100,000 college degree, but invest $10,000 per year in courses, books, mentorship, and skill development directly related to wealth building. Poor people often have expensive formal educations, but no practical financial education, leaving them highly educated but financially illiterate. The most successful people I studied spent 10 to 15% of their income on education, books, courses, and skill development every single year. The least successful spent less than 1% of their income on learning anything new. This creates a compound knowledge gap where the wealthy become more valuable in the marketplace every year, while the poor become relatively less valuable as their skills become outdated. The brutal reality: in an economy where knowledge is power, those who stop learning start losing, regardless of what they learned in the past. The relationship revolution: who you know determines what you grow. The third difference is perhaps the most uncomfortable to discuss. Wealthy people systematically cultivate relationships with other successful people, while poor people often maintain relationships that reinforce their current financial situation. This isn't about being shallow or abandoning old friends. It's about understanding that your peer group's financial habits, opportunities, and mindset will inevitably influence your own financial trajectory. Wealthy people actively seek relationships with individuals who are more successful than they are. They join organizations, attend events, and participate in activities where they'll encounter people who think bigger, earn more, and operate at higher levels. They understand that proximity to success creates opportunities that isolation never could. Job offers, business partnerships, investment opportunities, and access to information that can accelerate wealth building. Poor people often maintain relationships primarily based on comfort, familiarity, and shared circumstances rather than shared aspirations. Their social circles tend to reinforce limiting beliefs about money, success, and what's possible for people like us. When someone in the group starts succeeding financially, they often face subtle, or not so subtle, pressure to not forget where they came from or think they're better than everyone else. The psychology behind this pattern is complex. Wealthy people experience what researchers call upward social comparison motivation. Being around more successful people motivates them to elevate their own performance. They view successful people as proof that achievement is possible and as sources of strategies they can adapt. Being the least successful person in a group of high achievers drives them to grow. Poor people often experience downward social comparison comfort. Being around people with similar or worse financial situations makes them feel better about their own circumstances. They view highly successful people as either lucky, corrupt, or fundamentally different from themselves. Being around struggling people reinforces the belief that their financial situation is normal and acceptable. The network effect compounds over time. Wealthy people's relationships generate referrals, opportunities, partnerships, and access to deals that aren't available to the general public. Their friends recommend them for high-paying positions, invite them into profitable investments, and share strategies that accelerate wealth building. Their network becomes their net worth, literally. Poor people's relationships often generate expenses rather than opportunities. Friends who need money borrowed, social events that require spending to maintain relationships, and peer pressure to participate in activities they can't afford. Their network becomes a net cost rather than a net asset. The most successful people I studied could trace their biggest financial breakthroughs to relationships they had intentionally cultivated with more successful individuals. The least successful were surrounded by people who shared their limitations rather than their aspirations. The time mastery secret: how the wealthy buy time while the poor sell time. The fourth fundamental difference is how wealthy and poor people think about time and its relationship to money. Rich people buy time whenever possible and use their time to create assets, while poor people sell their time for money and use their money to save time, creating opposite spirals that either multiply wealth or maintain financial struggle indefinitely. Wealthy people understand that time is their most finite resource, so they aggressively purchase time-saving services that allow them to focus on high-value activities. They hire housekeepers, landscapers, meal delivery services, and virtual assistants, not because they're lazy, but because they can earn more money in the time saved than they pay for these services. A wealthy person who earns $200 per hour will gladly pay someone $50 per hour to clean their house so they can spend those hours generating $200 worth of income or building assets worth thousands. Poor people do the opposite. They sell their time to save money on services, then wonder why they never have time to build wealth. They'll spend 4 hours cleaning their own house to avoid paying $200 for a cleaning service, even though those 4 hours could have been used to learn a new skill, start a side business, or work additional hours at higher pay. They optimize for saving money rather than creating money, which keeps them trapped in time-for-money exchanges. The psychological pattern reveals different relationships with control and efficiency. Wealthy people focus on controlling their time allocation and maximizing the value generated per hour. They ask, "What's the highest value use of my next hour?" and structure their lives accordingly. They delegate, automate, and eliminate low-value activities to create space for wealth-building activities. Poor people focus on controlling their expenses and minimizing the money spent per task. They ask, "How can I do this cheaper?" rather than, "How can I do this more profitably?" They take pride in doing everything themselves, even when outsourcing would free them to generate more income than the service costs. The compound effect creates entirely different life trajectories. Wealthy people buy back hours every week that they invest in learning, relationship building, and income generation, creating a positive cycle where time investments generate money that can purchase more time. Poor people spend hours every week on tasks that could be outsourced, creating a negative cycle where time spent saving money prevents them from making money. The most successful people I studied had systematically eliminated or outsourced every activity in their lives that did not directly contribute to wealth building or personal fulfillment. The least successful spent their evenings and weekends doing tasks that could be hired out for less than their potential earning rate, then complained they didn't have time to improve their financial situation. These behavioral differences between wealthy and poor people aren't about moral superiority or intelligence. They're about mental programming that creates predictably different outcomes. Every day, wealthy people make decisions that compound into greater wealth, while poor people make decisions that compound into greater struggle. The same opportunities exist for both groups, but different thinking patterns lead to different choices, which create different results over time. The uncomfortable truth is that changing your financial situation requires changing behaviors that feel wrong at first. Investing money instead of spending it feels like deprivation. Learning instead of entertaining feels like work. Networking upward feels uncomfortable. Buying time feels expensive. These behaviors only feel right after you see the results they create, which is why most people never develop wealthy habits. Right now, you're at a choice point. You can continue the behavioral patterns that created your current financial situation, or you can adopt the behaviors that create the financial situation you want. The wealthy people's behaviors I described aren't secrets. They're visible to anyone willing to observe and implement them. The question is whether you'll choose temporary comfort or long-term wealth. Your current financial situation is a perfect reflection of your current behavioral patterns. If you want different results, you need different behaviors. The good news is that these behaviors can be learned and developed by anyone willing to feel uncomfortable while their new habits compound into new outcomes. Wealth isn't about what happens to you. It's about what you do consistently over time. The wealthy people I studied weren't born different. They became different through daily choices that most people avoid because they require sacrificing immediate pleasure for future gain. Every behavior I described is available to you right now, regardless of your current income or circumstances. The only question is whether you will implement them or keep doing what you've always done while hoping for different results. If these behavioral differences hit you like a wake-up call, if you recognize patterns in your own life that have been keeping you from the wealth you deserve, smash that like button right now, because this truth needs to reach everyone who's ready to stop making excuses and start making changes. Subscribe and ring that notification bell if you're serious about adopting wealthy people's behaviors and seeing what happens when you think and act like the person you want to become financially. Comment below and tell me which of these behaviors you're going to change first, not someday, but this week. Because public commitment creates accountability that private promises can't match. And here's what I need you to do right now. Click that next video that YouTube has perfectly selected for you, because the momentum you're feeling right now is precious, and the next video will show you exactly how to implement these behaviors without overwhelming your current life. Your wealthy future is waiting for you to take the next step, and that step is literally one click away. Don't let this moment of clarity fade into just another good intention. Take action now.